Hello, my name is Matt Bird, and welcome to the PublishU Podcast, where we explore the real life stories of authors from around the world. Today, I'm talking to Rick Paynter from Melbourne, Australia, who has written a book called More Than Just Church. Rick, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here.
I must say, I've missed visiting Australia numerous times a year. It's just the most wonderful place. And I think Melbourne for me is probably still the food capital of Australia. Would you say that?
I think so, yes. It's the culture capital. It's the everything capital of Australia,
It's
really.
the everything capital because you live there, of course. But I always remember the restaurants in Melbourne. Absolutely amazing.
Restaurants, coffee, culture, theatre, all sorts of things.
There we go. You on the tourist board by any chance?
I'm
You on the tourist board by any chance?
no, I'm not. No.
But just love where you live, and why shouldn't you?
Mm.
Rick, we're here to talk about your book, but first of all, let's find out a little bit about you. Were you born and bred in Melbourne, Australia? Where are you from?
Yes, born and bred, Melbourne boy, in the late 50s. That'll give a bit away. So, yes, and I'm still living here. Still living here. I love it. I moved down towards the coast just after I got married. So I'm living closer to the ocean on what we call Port Phillip Bay, or the Puddle, as we call it in Melbourne. And it's a beautiful place to live.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And what work are you involved in Melbourne?
Well, I've got a couple of serious jobs, real jobs. I'm the
And some
pastor of,
unserious ones?
yes, I'm the pastor of a church, independent church in Melbourne. I have been doing that for 40 years in the same place.
Wow.
And I also run a child development agency which runs a school for poor children in Papua New Guinea.
Wow. Amazing. So you visit Papua New Guinea once a year? More?
No, 5 or 6 times a year I'm there.
Wow.
I'm on the governance board, and it was launched from our church about 30 years ago,
Yeah.
and we've continued to support that work. It's all, local, national people teaching and leading and administrating, but I bring the governance, and I also do a lot of donor development amongst corporations to make sure, because it's a free school.
Yeah.
It's a school for poor children. They get everything. So we have to provide everything. So that's my role.
Amazing. Really, really good. And you've written a book. So how does a church pastor and somebody who's started a child development agency, I mean, why would you write a book?
It's a very good question. I've been working on this book for 20 years. And
Gosh.
then I have to say, you helped me to get it real. The reason behind it all really was, I think, legacy.
Yeah.
I was wanting to record the what I think is quite a unique journey of our church. Every church is different. Our church is not better than any church, but it's unique. And I wanted to record that journey for myself and I guess my family, my church, but also maybe a wider audience of pastors and leaders and Christians who might be inspired to seek after God themselves.
Amazing. So you were working at the book for 20 years.
Yes.
And
Embarrassing,
then
isn't it?
we connected over it, and you got it done in a much shorter
4 months.
period.
Hmm.
4 months. Okay. What were the obstacles you faced in the 20 years? What was getting in
Hmm.
your way over those 20 years?
Also, another good question. I think fear,
Yeah.
because it wasn't a memoir and it wasn't a church history, but it was a sort of a blend of both, add in some learnings and mistakes. So I wanted to get it right. And so that
Yeah.
slowed me down. I think the second thing it would be fair to say is time, um, just being super busy and not making the time. Another thing you taught me to do that. And then I think really it was an evolving story. And I
Yeah.
think if I had have written it 20 years ago in a 3 month period,
Yeah.
then I would have missed a lot of what God was saying to me. And so I think I had to wait
Yeah.
um, to be elderly.
Oh, don't give me that, Rick. We're both spring chickens. Come on.
We are, we are.
Absolutely. So, what helped you overcome those obstacles?
Um, I have a very supportive wife. I think you've met my wife, and
Indeed.
she's very encouraging. But I think primarily it was her suggestion to contact you at PublishU. I have to give her the credit for that. Um, and she said, Matt's the guy to help you. And so when I signed up for the book writing course, I was a little cynical, but after the first week, I thought, wow, this is exactly what I need.
And what, I mean, we need to move on to your book in a moment, but what was it about the first week that made you think this is it?
Okay, it was your positivity. You will have a book after 100 days. But I think also the strategies were very clear, very practical. I
Mm.
love what were there, like 8 steps or something,
Yeah.
and each of them were very relevant to me and helped me. And once I started to work the strategy and do the work, it started to fall into place for me.
Amazing. So the
Mm.
book that you've been wrestling with for 20 years came to life in 4 months, and now it's
Yep.
published and available to the world. Um,
Yes.
that's an exhilarating feeling, I should imagine.
It is exciting. It's very exciting. I never thought of myself as an author. The classic, the world doesn't need another book. But I think you convinced me that there's usually a book in everyone and that the world does need the book that I would write because no one else could write it. I thought that was a very wise thing to say.
Mhm. And what's the big message of the book, Rick? We're going to drill down into a couple of things, but what's the overarching message that you wanted to communicate through more than just church?
Yeah. The big message, I think, is that God is always enough and he's always more. And I was very inspired by the Apostle Paul's writing in Ephesians, which is my favorite Bible book, I confess. In chapter 3, verses 20, 21, it says that now God is able to do incredibly more than we can ask, think, or imagine, according to his power at work in us through the church. And that grabbed me, that captivated me early in my ministry. And so I thought this, if because I'm not smart enough to do everything. And I just think anything that we've achieved has been by the inspiration of the Spirit. So I wanted to build a book around God's incredible power to do more than we can think. Do we trust Him? Do we believe Him for that as pastors and leaders? Mm.
And tell us one of the stories. I'm sure your book is full of stories
Yes,
where in I mean, being in any job for 40 years deserves a a very good bottle of red wine to be opened and enjoyed with friends. Um,
yes, I'll hold you to that.
yeah, well, absolutely, so you should. But to be a pastor for 40 years is just like, I mean, being a pastor is a wonderful role, but to sustain that over 40 years is
Mm.
incredible. And there's more to come. I mean, what is the one standout story in those 40 years, Rick, where you had to trust God tangibly?
Mm. I think in the book I mention the mission of our church. Christian mission usually is defined as that as being outside of the church walls.
Yeah.
It's the purpose for which God created the church for us to help people to know about His love and care. And we do a lot of work in Papua New Guinea. And I think one of the outstanding stories. I was in a mountain range in the central highlands of Papua New Guinea in the early 90s with one of the pastors that I mentioned in the book. He's our key guy there, and we were standing on a mountain looking down a valley, and it was filled with smoke and the planes at the airport. in that regional town were cancelled because there was no tower, all on instruments, and they couldn't fly in. So we were standing there just looking at that rare side of pollution on pollution, and everybody lights fires there. And the pastor I was standing with looked up, and I couldn't see anything. And then a few minutes later, he said, it reminds him of Isaiah 40. And I said, what does? He says, the birds. And just at that moment, some of the air cleared, and he'd seen in the sky two massive eagles. And my eyesight was not as good as his. Their eyesight and hearing is brilliant, and he'd heard the noise of the eagles. And he said that really we need the Holy Spirit to lift us up to where those eagles are, above the pollution of the world, in order to see what God wants us to do, and then to land so that we can put in place the things that God has for us to do in Papua New Guinea. Because we were standing there going, how are we going to, two pastors from small churches, how are we going to have any influence on this, even this valley, which had like 10,000 people in it? It was a daunting task, but I was just inspired by his simple faith and insight, and he's just connected it for me like that. And that story's in the book, and there's this story after story like that of how God at the right time, brought the right person along with the right inspiration, and partnered me and our church with people who God was working in and through. Yeah, that's one story. It's a good story.
Amazing story. And it's very visual, isn't it? That's what I love about it. You can, with the words that you've used, you can actually see that picture standing on
Mm,
the mountain.
yeah.
I love it. I love it.
There's a lot of that in the book. I think I try and write a little bit visually. It's very personally written. As I said, it's not quite a memoir, but over 40 years, there's a lot of my life development. I was much younger when I started, and God has taught me and led me through that time. And so I tried to be as open and transparent as I could and share the story. And there's a whole chapter there of it's called "The Journey Begins and Begins Again." It's like I call it the "Oops" chapter. It's it's all the things we tried that didn't work, but God stuck with us, and we're here today. Mm.
Amazing. Really amazing. So, Rick, what's your one hope for the book of the impact it has? What would you love to see happen now this
Mm.
for people to buy and read?
I think I would love it to be a blessing and an inspiration to as many people as possible. Ultimately, I really do believe that life is not about me. It doesn't matter if I don't sell millions of copies or become some, world famous author. But I would like to think that it's written by an Australian pastor about Australian churches, but even international churches might get inspired that God can do incredibly more. And I would love, when I'm sitting on my veranda in my 90s, having some of that famous red wine that you mentioned, and someone emails me and says, I read that book you wrote, in 2025, and tells me a story about how God has moved in his or her life to lift them to levels, above the mess of the world that they found themselves in, to do incredibly more than they thought or could even imagine, and how it's blessed them and blessed their church. I think if I could have even one person tell me that, I would be a happy man.
Wow. Well, Rick, that's a great way to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to you all for listening to the PublishU podcast, featuring the real life stories of authors from around the world. If you're interested in becoming an author like Rick, please do visit our website, www.publishu.com. And if you enjoyed this broadcast, ensure that you subscribe so that you can hear more. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye for now.